Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Chasing Dreams podcast with Charlie and Justin for episode number 14. Justin, what's happening?
Not much, man. Just got done with a good gym session, a nice long run.
Awesome. So today, we finished up last week a successful interview with Chris Green,
yeah.
Officer Green. Today we're going back to kind of like your regular scheduled programming, where we're going back to our fat loss phase.
Mm-hmm.
We introduced this kind of mini-series a couple weeks ago. What we did was we said, we would cover some different items with fat loss. We would cover the first step we took was talking about the mindset and the planning and the preparation that goes into it. Second, area under our fat loss itemization was the nutrition aspect. And then today we figured that we'd get into a little bit of the training aspect of things, which can incorporate both, in the gym training and cardio work, and then, of course, everything in between, outside of the gym. So there's kind of a lot to cover here.
Yeah, this was fun. This is going to be a fun one. This is where, we got really close in our relationship and stuff. So this is going to be a fun one.
So whenever I think of training, my mindset is going to go to a different place than a lot of people's. Your mindset goes predominantly towards triathlon training. Obviously, the lifting component is important for you, but your goals, are predominantly outside the gym. For me, it's more weight training based, and a lot of times I think of athletic training too, because, being a coach and being a trainer, working with a multitude of athletes, that's kind of where my mind goes. Some people may think of sports-specific training, so essentially like practicing, whatever their sport is. So I think that when you use the term training, it's really encompassing of a lot of different things. I don't think that you can specifically pigeonhole what training is or what training should be. I know a guy, well, don't know him personally, but see, this is the thing, is I wish that I had, it's nice that we do these off-the-fly podcast episodes, but when I think of things in my head, I wish that I had a reference to look up who I'm talking about, and I had planned for it previously. There's a guy on Instagram. If anybody knows his name, send it to me because it's eluding me right now. His name is Bud, I believe. And Bud works outside in his front lawn. He does all of his training outside. He has like old rusted weights out there. He lifts logs and throws knives and carries tires and does tons of crazy stuff. But it's awesome because he's incredibly strong and very unique in his approach to training. But like that kind of shows the variability of the word training. It doesn't necessarily mean in the gym lifting,
right,
or outside cardio or cardio equipment or basketball or whatever it is. I mean, it's really incorporates a whole bunch of different variables.
Yeah.
Just moving and using your body to get more efficient at whatever you're trying to accomplish.
I really like that actually. Whenever I first started lifting with you, training with you, and training in general, I always said I'm going to go to the gym and lift, or I'm going to go lift, or I'm going to go work out.
Mm-hmm.
And once we actually started like doing it together and stuff all the time, you told me about training because we are training for something. You're training for a bodybuilding show or career in bodybuilding. I'm training to have a healthier life. Be able to run, bike, and swim faster and better, and just be healthy all around. But everything we do is training. And I like that idea, that thought, that we're not just working out. If we were working out, we could do that anywhere. And we can train anywhere. But I mean, like, the aspect of training in general.
I think that there's nuance in the word. It seems so trivial, but when I think about lifting, I feel like that word just has connotations with it that assume it's casual.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to go to the gym and work out, or I'm going to go to the gym and lift,
right,
or I'm going to go for a run. But when you say training, that implies, like you mentioned, that you're training for something. There's a goal, there's an end point, there's a performance aspect that's associated with it.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't like saying I'm going to go lift or I'm going to go to work out. I'll say, like, I'm training.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'll talk with people about at the gym too, like, because they'll always say, "Hey, are you in training?" And when people say that, what they're trying to get at is, are you getting ready for a show? Are you in prep? And for me, I kind of fell victim to that mindset where I was training when I was getting ready for a show. And then when I wasn't getting ready for a show, I was lifting.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you kind of take your off season as serious as your prep, that's when you actually make progress.
Yeah.
So for me, I kind of needed to continue to, because it's not that I didn't work hard, but I always was able to kick it up a notch during prep. It's like, okay, I have a show in mind. Now it's go time. And that really shouldn't be your mindset. You should have that mindset with whatever you do if you're truly
Right.
trying to get better. So the training mindset, it shouldn't change. It should always be at a high level. Now, I'm not saying you can always be in combat mode all the time. You need to taper it down accordingly, but I think that it's important to take it seriously regardless
Right.
of what you're doing.
I agree. Well, it's like they always say anything worth doing is worth doing right, and
Yeah.
giving everything you got.
My dad used to say it all the time,
Yeah.
so it kind of resonates in my head still to this day. All right, so when you think of fat loss, most people think of cardio.
Yeah.
Me, and maybe I'm biased because of the nature of what I do personally with bodybuilding. I think that the foundation of training should probably come in the weight room for most people. Now, that really depends on a myriad of factors, obviously. Like, I'm not going to say that, hey, whatever you're doing, you should start in the gym. Some people think, again, that there's bias there, and potentially there may be. But I think that it's important to start in the weight room because regardless of what you're doing, I don't think there's any sport, you could say like maybe cross country, but even then I could make an argument with it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any sport or goal that you have in mind where getting bigger, faster, and stronger can't help.
Right.
And those are accomplished in the weight room.
That's right.
So I think that that's kind of the foundation. And I would, even though, like we said at the beginning of the episode, definitions of training vary, I think that most people at least associate the weight room with whatever their training definition is to some degree. It may not constitute 90% of it, but it's probably going to constitute a majority of it.
Yeah,
or at
for
least
sure.
a decent chunk of it. So, like, I think that that's the foundation. Now, when you talk specifically to fat loss, that's where I think people tend to miss the boat. I understand that there's this general consensus that thinks, if you do heavy weight, low reps, you're going to gain muscle tissue, which is true, given all other factors are optimized. But then there's like this counter belief, or I shouldn't say counter belief, but the opposite end of that is if you do low weight, high reps, you burn fat.
Right.
Which, God, there's so many different, arguments you can have within this, so I don't want to give black and white answers to things that aren't black and white, because in theory you'd be burning more calories potentially if you have higher volume workouts where you're doing more, so I guess you could be burning more calories, but as far as specific to fat loss, it's not doing anything.
No.
I think that I see a lot of times when people get started in the gym, they have these training sessions where they're doing high reps, low weight because they're trying to burn fat, and they think that if it burns, that means fat's burning, which
Right,
isn't the
right.
case. That's lactic acid within the muscle tissue. It's not helping you burn fat necessarily or specifically. So let me talk about bodybuilding for a minute, just because it's something that I have a high familiarity with, obviously, and the training. This analogy that I'm going to give you can kind of parallel all other areas too. It's going to like transcend just bodybuilding, and you can apply this elsewhere. So like for bodybuilding, when I go into a prep, or when most semi-intelligent or experienced people go into a prep, your training really shouldn't change a whole lot. So, if it got you to it, it'll get you through it kind of mentality. So like if I, do a specific type of training that I know works well for my body, then when I go into prep and I start, taking my calories down, obviously you may need to adjust the volume, especially as calories get low. But realistically, the type of or style, for lack of a better word, that you're training is like it shouldn't change at all.
Yeah.
So my training really doesn't get altered as I go into prep unless it's necessary because of energy levels or injury risk. Because obviously when you're 3, 4, 2 weeks out, you're higher susceptibility to
Right.
injury or whatever. So my training doesn't change. So I'll still train the exact same way that I do when I'm gaining muscle or when I'm losing fat. A lot of that is, predicated on nutrition,
Right.
more so than anything.
That's I was watching a YouTube video with Mark Bell earlier today actually, and he had the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's like the world's best squat guy. So he was putting a squat clinic on and teaching not teaching Mark Bell, but teaching Mark Bell's followers how to squat properly. And he said the first thing you need to do is set up his key. So like he said, you get in there and you get your setup perfect, even if you're going to lift the empty bar compared to if you're going to lift 6 plates. Everything needs to be the same, because then whenever it comes time to be heavy, you don't have to focus on your thing. So I think that's kind of like what you're saying is like, everything needs to stay the same, right? So the way you trained all year round before you get to prep, you're going to continue to train that way. Like,
Yeah.
And I've noticed that when we, with how we work out, it's very the same stuff. We might change a movement here or there, but it's all the same stuff because it's working.
It's like the old cliche: if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Literally took the words out of my mouth.
So I don't change variables in my training or my nutrition with my coach Austin unless I need to change.
Right.
So I guess in the weight room, I wouldn't approach fat loss training because we wanted to have fat loss undertones in this conversation here to kind of keep our theme of fat loss episodes going, like our mini series or whatever you'd call it. I don't think that the strength training really matters, or the weights really matter specifically to fat loss. I think that if you're doing something, because with my main goal, it's to build muscle.
Yeah.
Now, when I lose fat, my main goal is to keep that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally continue to build muscle, but given certain caloric restrictions and environmental factors internally, it's not really possible all the time. So I just want to hold on to as much muscle tissue as I can. Like I know a lot of people that will go into a diet phase, and then immediately their training starts changing, where they're using lighter weights. Well, then they complain about how weak they are. It's, well, not only are you dropping calories, but the neurological stimulus or the tissue stimulus isn't there because you're using lighter weights. So I just think that the overall takeaway would be, don't let your training change specifically to fat loss.
Right.
Now, a lot of people don't know what works best for them because a large majority of people fit into the paradigm of, I'm in this group where when I first started lifting, my primary goal was to lose fat. Mm-hmm. So I can't go off of what works and what doesn't because I don't know what works and what doesn't.
Right.
And those are the people where you have to have a little bit different conversation with them.
Right.
Where it's kind of, in my estimation, you should just follow something. It doesn't matter what it is. Get something on paper, look something up. And to be fair, I'm not even really a big believer in hiring a coach when you start too.
Like, well, maybe wild because you are a coach.
Yeah, and maybe if you're competitive, and a lot of my clients are first time, like, I have no idea what I'm doing, I need help type of people. But sometimes when you do that, it takes a lot of trial and error out of it, which is a phenomenal learning tool. What do they say? Failure, like first attempt in learning.
Yes.
So I think that there's something to be said about failure and how it helps benefit you, and that kind of piggybacks off of a previous episode. But I think that I don't want you to waste time, but sometimes it becomes robotic and monotonous when you have a coach tell you what to do all the time without asking questions. So like when I work with clients, I try to make sure that I'm teaching them why we're doing this. Even like my athletes, especially my athletes, like when we do different exercises, I'm going to give you specific application to the sport. Or maybe if it's not specific to the sport, it's specific to a physical improvement. Like it's going to make you faster or jump higher because X, Y, and Z, and this is why we're doing it. Because I want to teach too. So when you're trying to lose fat, and you're using the weight room as a tool to do that, which is a phenomenal tool, and it needs to be integrated into a fat loss plan, because fat loss ultimately is about body composition, and how you look. It's not about the numbers, because you could be 15% body fat, 12% body fat, 8% body fat. It really doesn't matter. It's the only reason people want to lose that tangible numbers because they want to look good.
Right.
So you could look good at a higher body fat if you have more muscle. Mm-hmm. You could have two people that have 15% body fat. Take the world's strongest men, for example.
Yeah.
Some of those competitors have relatively high levels of body fat, but they don't look like it because they have so much muscle tissue built up. So structurally, they look jacked beyond belief. So I think that it's an important tool to incorporate, and if you don't know what works best for you, just start with something and kind of go from there. Don't change too quickly, though.
I have to agree with that 100%. And you said, I liked what you said earlier, and it's like kind of one of my only notes I took was you said put something on paper. So make a plan. So that goes back to another, a previous podcast, I think 2 or 3 episodes ago, where we talked about having plans. So make a plan. And what I would suggest is get a notebook. Because 6 months from now, when you are getting towards the end of that notebook and you flip back, you're going to see huge improvements. And you're going to be like, wow, I'm so glad I got a notebook.
One of my pillars of training, because, I actually have a buddy of mine who applied for a head coaching job outside of the school district that he works in. And he's putting together a portfolio because he's been a head coach at different schools, coached in college, now working his way back into high school coaching. He had a head coaching opportunity open up that he wanted to take advantage of. And he asked me what my philosophy on training was, because he wanted to, putting some items together in his portfolio, and he wanted to talk about off-season workouts and, how to present this on what he would do if he was, to get the opportunity to be a head coach again at the high school level. So I thought about it, put it on paper, and it was pretty succinct, to the point, because I don't want to get wordy with what my philosophy is, because then it's not really a philosophy. It's just everything you know about training if you try to put it all on paper. One of my pillars of my philosophy, or my training philosophy, was progressive overload, which is nothing new. It's something that's been around for the dawn of time, essentially, at least in weightlifting regards. And it's progressive overload is just progressively getting stronger and adding more load or weight to the bar, to the movement, so that the body responds accordingly and makes the tissue stronger, upregulates the nervous system to handle the weight, and then you get stronger and bigger over time.
Yes.
Now, it's not really that simple, because progressive overload doesn't necessarily happen just in load. So the weight on the bar could happen in frequency, so you could lift more frequently, but eventually that tapers out because you can only train so often and recover from it.
Right.
You could progressively overload in volume. So the volume aspect then becomes difficult to adhere to long term, because you can only work out for so long and do so much during a workout. Right. You can't keep increasing your volume because, again, recovery aspect. So logically, the main component that you have to go with there is just the load. You have to get stronger over time. So that's kind of one of the things that I've always looked at based on my training, and that's another important reason to keep the logbook. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be specific to building muscle tissue, although that's obviously going to help with fat loss goals. But when you think about even like running or cardio, if you're implementing cardio into a fat loss plan, not that I'm saying more cardio or progressive cardio is always better, but I think you do need to keep tabs on what you're doing, because then you're not going to know what's working and what's not.
Right.
I mean, you take Dorian Yates, who's, 6-time Mr. Olympia in the 90s, one of the greatest bodybuilders to ever live, and he kept a logbook. I think there's the stigma that goes along with a logbook where people think it's very, I don't know, like not juvenile as in childish, but like rookie-ish.
Right.
Like why is this guy writing in his notebook? But, if it worked for 6-time Mr. Olympia, I think it would work for me as well. And I noticed it because it's accountability on my part, not mental accountability like, oh, I need, to follow the logbook because, I won't go to the gym or something like that. It's more like accountability as in I need to get progressive overload.
Yeah.
I remember, and I don't know if I mentioned it on the podcast before, but I was listening to the Table Talks with Dave Tate from Elite FTS, the powerlifting podcast, and he had J.M. Blakely, who was one of the West Side powerlifters from back in the day, on. And J.M. was talking about progressive overload and how it was the cornerstone of his training, which any strength and, physique athlete will probably tell you it's the cornerstone of their training as well. And he said that what he used to do is he would take 2.5-pound plates and he would drill holes in them until they weighed a pound, because he would make sure definitively that he went up in weight every single time he lifted. He said, even if it was a pound, I'm good. And he said that
stronger.
He would actually put, drill holes in those plates until they're a pound and just put it on one side of the bar. Now, granted, you can do that when you're benching 400 pounds, 500 pounds, 600 pounds, because 600 pounds to 601 is technically progressive overload, and that 1 pound on your right side or left side is a negligible difference, and you're not going to notice it when you're benching that much weight. So I thought that was a pretty cool insight that he had there about how specific he needed to go up. And it kind of falls along the lines of a saying that I like, that, you're either getting better or you're getting worse.
Right.
You're never really stagnant, because biologically speaking or physiologically speaking, your body doesn't want to have a lot of muscle tissue. The extremes that we go in sports, like extreme endurance athletes or extreme strength athletes or, physique athletes. Your body doesn't want to do that.
Right.
You know, so if I have, you know, an exorbitant amount of muscle, my body's going to try to eat at it and take it away. It's metabolically expensive, requires a ton of oxygen, and it's not good for what your body inherently wants to do.
Right.
So I think that you're either getting better or getting worse. So whatever you do for your fat loss, if it's lifting is concerned, I think that you need, again, to track it and make sure that you're getting better at what you're doing. I think that another area that people struggle in with that, though, is they want to get better and constantly improve, but then the variables change too much.
Right.
Like you said, we do the same thing over and over again until we need to change it.
Mm-hmm.
Like most people, especially if you're doing the gym, you shouldn't really change your training for, months and months and months. And even then, you probably won't learn a whole lot, because if you're new to lifting weights, you're going to experience progress like crazy.
Yeah.
No matter what you do.
Newbie gains.
Yeah. I mean,
had tons of them.
Yeah, and it's awesome. Both for fat loss. I mean, when you now, granted, part of that was because of how big you were.
Right.
But like when you started losing fat, it's easy.
Yeah.
And then the more and more body fat you lose, the more and more difficult it becomes, and the more, you know, regimented you need to be, and the more, I don't want to say dedicated, but more specific with your approach.
100%.
And I think we could say the same thing about cardio too, though. Like I said, you know, I don't want it to be, oh, cardio needs to keep improving, but you do want to get a little bit more efficient at what you do, and you do want to log what you do. Like you know, for you right now in your training, it's very progressive.
Yes, getting a lot more dense.
Now, and then we have to throw in there like the deloading that comes along with weight training, and deloading that can come along with, you know, high levels of cardio, where you taper back, pull back a little bit, take your foot off the gas, give your body a break. But mainly, you're aimed at overload.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to talk about your training a little bit, because I think that could be an interesting pathway, kind of to not only piggyback off this discussion, but then kind of weave our way further into it.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, with the triathlon, you know, swim, bike, and run, it's complex to, you know, especially to me, because, like, I have no idea where I'm going with this. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know how to put a plan together, so I had to research. And then I used my dad as a coach, because it's what he does. So he wrote me a plan, and we update it weekly. And it's basically it is one of the sports every single day, to a pretty high excess. Like today, I had a 45-minute run, which for somebody who's 300 pounds, running for 45 minutes is tough.
Now let me interrupt you. I know that we've said this multiple times, but for any new listeners that we may have out there, you have the privilege of not needing to do guesswork with your training, even though you're technically new to the endurance sport world. Your dad, who is an Ironman, which is like the pinnacle of
endurance sports,
psychosis, in my opinion. He's putting together these for you.
Yes.
So it's actually not that I'm discrediting you or saying it's not difficult for you, but it's a little bit easier from the planning side of things, because you're not going into this thinking like a new person in the gym saying, oh, I got to figure this out. So you have it's pre-planned. So basically you just do the grunt work.
I just do the work. You know what I mean? I read the thing, and he tells me what to do, and I go and put the work in. So Charlie puts my diet together and fuels my body, and then all I literally am is the machine, basically pushing the buttons and making it work. But, you know, there's something to be said about progressive overload, even in cardio work. On the 4th of July this year, or last year, on the 4th of July, I did 3.1 miles in 59 minutes, 58, 57.
And when you started, I remember we were having this discussion, because I did a 5K for the gym that I work at, one of the gyms I work at, that was sponsoring a 4th of July 5K. And so you went elsewhere. You went down into a neighboring town and did your 5K. And I remember the discussion that we had prior. You said, I want to finish in under an hour.
Right.
And that was your first one, never did it before.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like, okay, well, you know, that hour sounds reasonable, I guess. You know, me not being an endurance guy, truthfully, I had no idea what would be a good time or a bad time, especially for someone, of your size
Yeah.
and your experience or lack thereof. So yeah, let's start there. And you got 50. What did you say it was? 59. What?
I would have to look back. I think it's 58 something, 58, 57.
Regardless, you're under an hour.
It was just shy of an hour, and if I wouldn't have ran as hard as I possibly could and put everything on that I had at that time,
yeah,
I wouldn't have got it.
Uh-huh.
At the very end, I had to run to get it. So, but I guess what I was saying there is so that was just under a year ago.
Uh-huh.
And I was on the verge of death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I felt like I was done. And so a couple of things that I learned from that is the next month I did a 5K. And I did it in 45 minutes-ish. I don't know exact time. I'd have to look back and see.
Now, just a little correction, though. Was that 4th of July or was it Memorial Day?
It was on the 4th of July.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
It was the Freedom 5K in Chester, West Virginia.
Yeah.
It was a big one for me because it was my wife's first one when she started losing weight years ago. And I don't know, I really liked it. I went and watched her do it, and a guy did it in full battle rattle. And it got me fired up. So...
Yeah, I can be honest that I probably will sympathize with most of our listeners and say that I've never seen people running and thought that it would be fun.
I'm a sicko. I love it. I'm really in love with the stuff that I could never do before.
Yeah, we've talked about that in earlier episodes about how you kind of naturally gravitated towards like the exact opposite of what you were. So
yes.
you were at the the top threshold of obesity and lack of health, and now I want to do literally the exact opposite of that.
I want to be the absolute best I can possibly be every day. So everything I do, I put absolutely everything I have into it.
Yeah.
When it's sleeping, I put everything I got into it.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I was back to what I was at on the times. So the next month I did a 5K and the time was faster, but I felt like crap again.
Yeah.
Right. Today. So and then fast forward to now. I did nine races last year. Every single time, other than the last 3, I got faster, but I felt the same. That same feeling. And I talked to my dad in the off season when we first started this off season and this prep for this indoor triathlon. He said, you should feel that bad every race, even if you get to where you're 160 pounds and running a 20-minute 5K. You should feel that bad at the end because that means you put everything out there. You gave it your all. You are putting it there.
Yep.
David Goggins talks about it. Cameron Haynes talks about it, where when you know you're doing it right when it hurts. Now,
I can't speak to that specifically to the endurance training. But I know that in strength training, it actually you get worse. Like you feel worse because neurologically your body is adaptive,
right? And
you are able to handle heavier weights. So like my sets of if I do a true 5x5, like let's say I do 5 sets of deadlift, 5 reps for each set. If I actually max out those 5 reps, like I could do that several years ago and be okay. Now a 5x5 kills you. Like the stronger you get, the more neurological cueing, or not necessarily cueing, but the more neurological drive you're able to put into those sets absolutely destroys you. I was actually having this discussion with someone about it was my friend who I mentioned earlier who's applying for that head coaching job. We were talking about percentage based. Like, do you do percentage based workouts for some of your athletes? Like, you get for those of you that are unfamiliar, you get a 1 rep max. So let's use bench. It's a good example. You bench as much as you can for 1 rep, just one time. That is your max. That's your maximum weight that you can do. Then your training is kind of undulated off of that percentage. So like you'll do 80% one week for this many sets of this many reps, or 85% or 70%. Then you deload 60% or 50%, whatever. A bunch of different ways to structure it. But regardless, we were talking about how the percentages are actually more difficult the better the athlete is. Because I told him, in my experience, like I'll have freshmen that do, like we did one phase where we did like a circa max phase where we were working right around their maxes. So they would max out, and then it was a 4-week training cycle where we would do, like 90%. We'd only do 1 rep at 90%, but we do 8 sets. So you're doing 8 sets of 1 at 90%, which after
close.
2 or 3 sets, you're almost dying because that's near your max. And then we would do 92.5% for 6x1 or whatever, and gradually we worked our way up to 97.5%. So you're almost hitting your 1 rep max for 3 singles, and then we would retest and then start the training cycle over. And the kids got incredibly strong from it, but it was really, really difficult for the seniors because the freshmen, they could actually do their 1 rep max and recover okay, both tissue-wise and neurologically and stuff. Whereas our seniors, we had kids like, Garrett Givens, for example, who was a great, football player and athlete to come through our school that I coached for several years. His 1 rep max on squats was near 500 pounds as a running back, and we're talking quality squats. I mean, the kid, goes all the way to the floor with great technique on hang cleans and power cleans, well over 300 pounds. When he's doing his circa max work, it crushes him, and it should crush him because he's using so much heavier load. So I think that the more progressive you get in your training, the harder it gets even, and you should feel terrible because it gives you the ability to push more.
Right. So I think that's the big, it's the similarity really. Whenever you're doing, whenever I'm on my running and my, bike and swim, it's surprisingly the same because like I said, my first 5K I never really tested for it. I mean, I did a few on accident, because I was enjoying my walks and stuff.
Yeah.
They were all walks. I never ran. Today I did a 5K today in 45 minutes, but I was only at 4. I did an RPE of 4 to 5. So the relative perceived effort was only 4 or 5 on the scale of 10. So I should be able to, in theory, if I could give it my all, give it a 10 for the full 5K, I should be able to do it in 25 minutes. I can't, obviously. Yeah. I mean, I'll gas out. So my ability to use the scale is off, right? But obviously it's working. You know what I mean? It's wild because I'm hovering right around the same weight I was, in November, but I'm, strength's going up, and I attribute all that to progressive overload.
And I think that you're actually a testament to everything we spoke about today, because when you first started doing this, your dad wasn't there, and you were in charge of your own training. Now, we kind of helped, at the gym kind of guide you through the weight training component. But when you first started losing weight, you were just kind of walking and kind of getting a feel for things on your own. Yeah. So you were really a prime example of someone who started off not knowing what to do, put something on paper with a plan, progressively got better at it, and now look where you're at. Yeah. So I think that we are working examples of the things we speak about.
Right.
Now, every episode, I feel like we give that disclaimer that we're not perfect, nor do we know everything, nor do we try to act like we know everything. But a lot of this stuff, we are speaking from personal experience.
Yeah, and I'm passionate about it. You know what I mean? That's why I do this podcast, is because I hope that somebody can hear my voice, how much I really believe this, and they get the strength and muster up the ability, because a lot of people, where they're in my shoes, where they're even at the weight I'm at today, and the progress I've made, a lot of people at my size look at a gym and the thought of going in them doors is not going to happen.
Yeah.
I even have a friend, and we talked about her on here before, where she's a smaller lady, and she would not go through the doors.
Yeah.
So
by no means even remotely close to being out of shape.
Needs not lose any weight.
Yeah.
But she would not go in the door, and you know what I mean. I was that guy. I've been that guy. I still sometimes I'm like, and everybody and people ask me all the time, why? How can you make yourself go even after you work 15, 16 hours? It's because it's working.
Yeah. Yep.
And I want to be somewhere, and I hope that somebody gets that drive to want to be there. You know what I mean? Because it is a fun place to try to visit.
And I like how, when we provide these examples, and you always mention about how your goal is to help people. That kind of, what pops in my mind when I hear that is I think about, in the fitness industry now, social media provides the platform for a lot of people to do a lot of cool things. I know that social media gets bashed. Listen, I'm a teacher who works in a school district, and all kids have smartphones. So I understand that there's, a lot of bad things that happen on social media, and a lot of, kids get themselves into trouble on it. But I think there's a ton of good to come of it. But one of the things that the fitness industry, people, whoever they are, I hear it all the time, it's all over the place, where people bash coaches because of lack of experience, or they say, oh, that guy's not qualified to coach people because what's he ever done, or so-and-so's not qualified to give advice because what have they done, or, so you could actually, because you could look at us and say, well, how can they have a podcast? What have they ever accomplished? Because we said it before, we're just two average dudes. Like, I got a couple plastic trophies in bodybuilding, and you lost a human's worth of weight. Other than that, that's pretty much it. So one thing that I was thinking about was, realistically, it doesn't matter how, someone's experience doesn't matter, because there's always someone that's going to be able to be helped by you. So, let's talk specifically. Again, I'm going to bring it back to bodybuilding just because of a high degree of familiarity with it. So it's something that I can actually give pretty good examples to. So one thing that I think about with it is, okay, just because you're not an elite level athlete and haven't won the Mr. Olympia doesn't give you, doesn't mean you're not qualified to coach. Now, I know there are some very bad coaches out there, and sometimes it can be potentially dangerous because you could get athletes hurt or in the hospital, or even, I don't want to be, over dramatic here, but you could kill someone if they're doing, the wrong things.
Well, listen, with bodybuilding, from what I can see on the outside looking in, definitely could kill somebody.
Yeah, it's you got a tight line. You got to kind of tiptoe there, but you don't have to have all these experiences to help people. There's always someone that's underneath you, so to speak. There's always someone that's underneath you that you can help, that you have enough knowledge base to help. That's kind of like this podcast. We kind of vary how much detail we go into, and I think that you and I, we spoke earlier that our target audience would be pretty much newer people, and I'm sure that some experienced athletes can gain some knowledge here, not just with the nutrition and the training, but from the mindset of things. But we said, let's keep this vague and general and kind of, have a podcast geared toward the general population. And I think that, you and I kind of shed that light for people, that we try to help people, but we also don't get into too intricate of a discussion to where it's above people's heads.
Right.
Not that I'm saying that, we have much of the ability to do that, but we try to keep things simple, but give the people what they want at the same time.
Right. And if somebody really wants that detail, social media, email, reach out to us, on Instagram or on Facebook, or send us an email, and I'll give you as much detail as I possibly can, and then I'll even ask Charlie for as much help as possible because he's the detail king. But on here, I like that. We try to keep it vague enough that you could follow along with what we're talking about and get somewhere.
Yeah.
You don't have to. That goes back to it. You don't have to have a crazy detailed plan to have success. So the basics, the foundation, making a plan, following your plan, and then when it comes to the gym, walk in the door and just do something and track what you're doing, because you're going to get better and you're going to want to know about it later.
Yep. Simple as that, man. So I think that it's funny that you mentioned, people listening to us and kind of the goals of not necessarily the goals of our podcast, but how we kind of structure things, and how we try to target our audience. And I always think about I'm still, I probably mention this every episode, I'm still in awe that people actually listen to this.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because it was kind of, I have people that talk to me all the time. They're like, oh, dude, I'm sorry, I haven't really been listening to your podcast, or I haven't had the opportunity to listen to the episodes yet. And it's almost like I feel like they think that they owe it to me because they're my friend to listen to this. It's like, dude, I don't care if you listen to this or not. I'm flabbergasted that we have as many people as we do.
Right.
I mean, if you would have told me, through these episodes, which, let's give some disclaimers, or not necessarily some disclaimers, but I don't want to call this an excuse, but let me provide some excuses here. We're not on large-scale platforms.
Right.
We're working hopefully on Spotify today. We should get on. We just got on YouTube literally days ago.
Only a couple episodes.
So really, all of our traffic is going through Libsyn.
Yeah.
And on Libsyn, we talked about it earlier, people having trouble because they didn't realize that you could download the episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So when the phone goes blank or the screen, goes to power save or whatever, the episode would stop playing. So they have to keep touching their phone to keep it re-upping. So even all that combined, we're still at almost 1,000 downloads, which was our goal by the end of February. We said by March we wanted to be at 1,000 downloads.
Yeah. So, we said by March we want to be at 1,000 downloads.
Yes.
And we said we were going to give away a few shirts to the listeners when we got there. So
Correct.
we're at 989 downloads right now.
So we need 11 more.
We need 11 more.
Which I'm hoping this episode will do.
So I'm pretty sure our OGs are going to get us over the hump today.
Yep.
Maybe tomorrow. But I'm thinking here, originally we were going to run like an ad. Oh, we got to 1,000 downloads on Instagram. Or on Facebook or whatever. Instead, let's give this shirt to the OGs.
Okay.
The people that followed us first. So the ones that are still listening, that took that challenge, that Give Us 3 episode challenge, and got bit the hook and are on the line now, and they're listening. So we're gonna, when we get to 1,000 downloads on all the social media platforms, my page, Charlie's page, our Instagram page, our Facebook page, we're gonna put out an opportunity for you to comment what the code word is. So the code word is Dream Chaser. Only the people listening to this episode are going to know the code word. And then people will be put into the drawing to get 2 free shirts.
Now, for the record, Justin and I have not discussed this at all.
Not at all.
He's shooting from the hip right now.
Sorry.
So this is completely live, actually.
So it was a thing that popped in my head because we could get 10,000 entries.
So let me clarify, not for the listeners, for myself, because like I said, we're doing this on the fly here. So once we hit 1,000 downloads, which should be
today, tomorrow.
I'm thinking tonight. What we will do is we will post. What we should do is we should probably wait maybe a day or two to let the people be able to listen to this.
We'll leave it open. We'll discuss it. Leave it open for 5 days.
Okay.
Put a limit, 5-6 days. Whatever it is. everything will be in the post.
Got it.
So you have a timeline. Like you have until this date, whatever it is. Comment Dream Chaser, and then share the podcast. Something. It'll all be instructions. Will be bulletproof.
Now let me ask this. I'm not trying to make this Swiss cheese and shoot holes through it. What if we post this and then one person comments Dream Chaser, or 2 people? Then is everybody going to comment Dream Chaser just because they see what the code word is? Should we have them maybe inbox us, maybe privately?
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah. So follow the instructions. It'll say to message us the code word. I like it.
Maybe we'll pick like first 5 people to do so.
Yep. Well, I figured we would just put it into the randomizer and pick them live.
Even better.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys heard it here, and again, I'm going to repeat this just for clarity purposes, not just for you guys, but for myself. Once we hit 1,000 downloads, which will likely be tonight, in a couple days, we're going to make a post asking you to DM us. I'll say this. Justin's really kind of spearheaded the Facebook page, and I've kind of spearheaded most of the Instagram stuff through my personal account. Now, Justin posts this through his personal account also, but I got to give him credit for essentially doing everything on Facebook side of things. But what we'll do on those social media platforms, we will post some directions on where to send the code word, and how we are going to select the people that won the T-shirts. But for the record, only the people listening to this episode are going to know what the code word is, and the code word is Dream Chaser. So write that down, log it away, keep it in your head, and in a couple days expect the post. Send the code word where we tell you to, and hopefully you win a free T-shirt.
Yes. I just thought that would be awesome.
Yeah,
I don't know.
very cool.
I think the guys and girls that are following us from the beginning are the ones that I want to give stuff to first.
Yeah, and for every person that has told me that they haven't had the opportunity to listen to it or they don't listen to it, I've probably had 5 others tell me that they love it.
Yes.
I've actually I almost feel like I don't even feel right saying this because like I feel that what we're doing is so trivial. It's just like us talking, and I don't really feel, even though we provide some things of substance, I just don't feel like it's worth what some of the compliments have been given to me.
It's crazy.
And I almost feel I'm not one to take compliments very well because I generally don't feel like that they're as deserved. And so when I've had people tell me that, like a friend of mine from Columbus told me that he listens to every episode and says that he feels like when we talk that we're speaking specifically to him. He's like, no, it's insane. He's like, when you talk, the things you talk about are hitting me perfectly. He's like, it's unbelievable. And then he talked about some of our guests. Like he mentioned Natalie specifically in a previous episode, I think episode 8. And he said, yeah, she says, like, I've never met her, but she sounds like an absolute rock star. And I was really motivated by what she said. So it's just really cool to hear people like listen to us.
I love it. I love this stuff, man. So just keep chasing your dreams.
And with that, that's a good ending because we are now at 45 minutes, which is about the time of our episodes.
That's awesome.
So I'm thinking one last thing I want to add real quick. Since we're on the verge of 1,000 downloads, would you think that a good opportunity for a Q&A is around the corner maybe for the next episode or coming up here just so we can kind of pick the brains of people? And I'm thinking that we target such a unique demographic and it's widespread. At least the people that I know that listen to it are all from like all over the place. So maybe, in one of our upcoming episodes, potentially episode 20 or so, because we're at, 14, maybe put it on an even number, we can start to do some Q&A just to kind of, and I think that we'll get a lot of like random questions.
Yeah,
some kind of specific.
Yeah. I hope they're crazy. Like, I hope somebody asks me about my diet because some people at work ask me, are like flabbergasted by some of my foods. So,
and what we'll do is we'll kind of obviously leave the inboxes eternally open for people that want to submit topics. Interestingly enough, you and I didn't have a guest for this episode, nor did we really have a topic until probably about 20 seconds before we hit the play button. We said, hey, let's go back to the fat loss phase. What did we talk about last time? Okay, we talked about the mental preparation and the prioritization. We talked about the nutrition. So the last part would be the training, which we kind of meandered our way around some semblance of training discussions this whole time.
No, it's good. It's good. I think it pretty much, for the introductory fat loss should be kind of like the wrapper-upper there, huh?
Yeah.
Wrapper-upper, wow. But yeah, right on.
All right, guys. With that, we have come to the end of yet another episode. We appreciate you listening as always. For the Chasing Dreams podcast, I am Charlie with Justin, and we are out.